All right. Hello, my friends. It looks like we are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I am so excited to be back here. I'm hearing my camera's a bit shaky, so I'm not going to be moving around too much. Let me see if I can fix that up here. All right, so we're getting started. It's been a day of a few tech issues, so we're going to hope that all clears up in time for our live session. And we're going to be talking about going beyond the ask, how you as a fundraiser can actually build your influence. And we've got a really good RSVP show up today. I'm thinking that people are really interested in finding out more about how to build their influence as a major gift fundraiser, because I think this is one of the most misunderstood skills that you can build as a fundraiser. So I'm really looking forward to, we're a bit jumpy on our video, apologies. I'm really looking forward to diving into this topic with you today. Before I get started, I want to introduce myself, because if we haven't met yet, my name is Emma Luzzi, and I help major gift fundraisers build the skills, the strategies, and the systems that they need to reach their ambitious campaign goals. So I'm here, you're here. I want to hear from you now. You'll discover if this is your first time on one of my lives. I love this to be an interactive experience. So I want to hear back from you. Where are you joining us from? Go ahead and drop that in the comments. Let me know where you're joining from. And if it's your first time joining me in one of these lives, I'd love to hear that as well. Are you a first-time joiner in one of these lives? I love to hear who is here and where you're coming from, and if it's the first time. And if you're catching up on the replay, go ahead and use the hashtag replay. I always come back into the comments, answer all of your questions. I know not everyone can join us live. Could be a time zone difference, could be all sorts of things. There is no volume, I'm hearing from folks. Okay, we really are having a... Now, are other people hearing me? Kevin, I wonder if this maybe you need to turn up your volume. But because it is Tech Issue Day, I wouldn't be surprised. I see other people are hearing me, Kevin, so maybe check your volume to see if you need to turn things up on your end. And my mic, okay. I'm hearing others are having tech difficulties too. This is making me feel a bit better. Oh, I'm seeing folks joining us from around the world, which is very exciting too, including Cambridge, UK. Hello, Ruth, Carol, lots of familiar names is joining us from Peterborough. We've got lots of folks coming back. I'm hearing from other folks about having tech challenges too on their end. I'm hearing that folks had some difficulty joining on their different platforms. So I'm happy to hear we're all kind of in the same boat today on that front. Hi, Penny, welcome. Okay, Joyce, you can hear me. Great, thank you. I love it. Okay, wonderful. There's always a little bit of a delay on these live streams of maybe like 20 seconds. So please, go ahead when you drop things in. It might show up to me a little bit later. But I am seeing you, Karen in Halifax, and Arthur joining us from Southampton. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to have you here today. And I'm going to go ahead and dive in, because I like to make sure we keep these sessions at a 30-minute length. So I commit to you, we're going to be finishing this at 30 minutes on the hour. And I've got a ton of things to cover today, including some questions to you. So I'm going to dive in. Before I do, I just want to reiterate, especially if you're just joining now, why we're talking about this today. I believe that influence is probably one of the most misunderstood phenomenon when it comes to major gift fundraising. We often think that influence is actually granted upon us due to a title or due to the power that we hold in an organization. And I'm here to tell you today that is not true. Influence is actually a skill that we can be building in a very practical way. I'm going to tell you how in this session today. And it's something all of us can build, no matter where we are, no matter our title, no matter our position in the organization, no matter who we're working with. We can all build our influence as major gift fundraisers. And when we build our influence, that can be an absolute game changer when it comes to working with our donors, working with our boards, working with folks within our organization. So I'm going to be touching on first the 3 most important habits that I think you need to be building to build your influence. And then I'm going to be talking about how we can apply these habits in our audiences. All right, I'm seeing folks joining, finally connected. It is just tech issue time, I feel like today, isn't it? So we're all here. We're all managed to show up despite our tech challenges. So let's go ahead and dive into the key habits you need to develop to become a more influential fundraisers. I'll start with my first one. If you've been following me for a while, this might not be a new one for you, but I think it's one of the most important skills we can build as major gift fundraisers, and that is curiosity. It's curiosity. And curiosity, like all the things I'm talking about today, curiosity is a skill that we can build just like any other. Often folks feel like it's an inborn thing, you know, I'm either born with it or I'm not, but it is actually a muscle that you can build and flex. And here's why curiosity is important. I think when I look at the most successful major gift fundraisers, they understand how crucial it is to know about the motivations of their donors when it comes to making gifts, right? Uncovering the motivations of the donors in terms of their why. Why are they giving? What is the deeper motivation behind their philanthropy? And it's very interesting when I'm talking with clients, oftentimes when we are talking about and I'm coaching donor motivation, I will hear this. I'll say, you know, tell me a bit more about, you know, about this donor. Is like, what's their deepest motivation around giving to you? I'll sometimes hear, well, I think, and I'm like, here's the great thing about curiosity. We're not going to be thinking, we're not going to be guessing. We're actually going to be asking great strategic questions and getting the donor to articulate this for themselves. So for me, absolute number one skill to build with your major donors that will increase your influence and your effectiveness as a major gift fundraiser is flexing and building that curiosity muscle and just getting really, really good at asking great strategic questions. Here are a few of my favorites. I always think I'm a bit of a question collector. I like to kind of collect great ones that I hear from other folks. But if you're not already asking strategic questions, I encourage you to become a bit of a question collector as well. And if you've got a great strategic question you love to ask, go ahead and drop that in the comments. I love to hear from folks. I always learn, and I think it's always great for us to be able to take advantage of the wisdom in the room here, in the virtual room. If you've got a great strategic question that you like to ask as part of your building of your curiosity skill, go ahead and drop that below. And I'm going to share a few of my favorites. One, I love this. I've used this in the context of cocktail parties, face-to-face donor meetings. What inspired your gift to this organization? I love that one. Again, I've probably learned that from someone in my travels as well. So I want to give credit where credit is due to all of those folks who have mentored me, who I've learned from. I love that one. What inspired your gift to the organization? And I like the language there because it does really kind of tap into a more emotional attribute or emotional end of things, if you will. So that's a really good one. I love, what is the change you want to see in the world with your philanthropy? I like just taking it up to the big, like this is good if you know a donor a bit better. I like to taking it up just to that big impact. Like, what is the impact folks want to achieve with this giving? And getting them to talk about their experience in their own words. Super powerful. Similarly, what do you want to achieve with your giving? I like that as well. Beautiful, open-ended question. Sometimes donors will be like, that's a great question. I've actually not spent a lot of time thinking about it. So, in some ways, I want to help you reframe your curiosity as being a bit of a gift to your donor in a lot of ways. Like, you're helping them think through what are kind of some of the foundational elements that actually drive their giving. And many donors appreciate having the time to step back and think about that. So we're hearing from Laura. How do you choose the organizations that you support? I love that. It's a great one. I heard another good one when I was talking about this on a previous live, and I'm going to try and remember how well it was beautifully framed about, how did you see philanthropy demonstrated in your family growing up? I loved that one. I'm probably not phrasing it quite as nicely as it was originally phrased, but you kind of get the picture there, to be getting the donor to be thinking about, like, how did I see philanthropy play out in my family? That's really interesting. What's the origin of generosity? I think that might have been the question. How did you see generosity demonstrated in your family growing up? Kate's suggesting, why is our organization dear to your heart? Carol, love this. If you were to become more invested in this project, what would that look like? So some great ideas, some great wisdom in the room. What's your favorite memory of our organization, of working with our organization? I love all of these. These are good. You're bringing some really great ideas here. And these are some great ways that you can kind of be building that curiosity muscle, building that curiosity skill. And this just becomes beautiful and natural in your conversation with donors. So very interesting, kind of counterintuitive. Sometimes we think about influence and going into a donor meeting of being like, I know all the things, I'm going to do a great pitch, right? Like this is going to be influential, when in fact, stepping back and asking more strategic questions is a much more powerful way to build your influence with donors. I love this. And therefore, it's also a great way for you to be able to build your influence with a donor, no matter what the title is, no matter what your title is, no matter what your position is. And I've been talking about donors, but this skill of curiosity can actually be applied in your work with other audiences as well. Okay, I got carried away there. Let me keep going, because I committed to keeping this to 30 minutes. I'm going to talk about leveraging the power of social proof next. So social proof is a term, you've probably heard it. It was originally coined by Robert Cialdini in his book Influence. It's kind of the original book talking about what is influence, what is not. Still a classic, very much worth a read. In plain language, social proof simply refers to the fact that we as humans are often looking to other humans for guidance on how to behave. We're like, okay, social proof is like, what's everybody else doing? We're very social animals, right? We're very social animals. So sometimes when we're making big decisions, or we're out of our comfort zone, or even in general, so we're looking to others. We're looking for examples. We're looking outside of ourselves for guidance on how to actually act, how to behave, how to make the decision. So that, in my words, is kind of the plain language explanation of what social proof is. Social proof can be immensely valuable to you in a few different ways. And let me shift things up and talk about, for example, I would say working with your board. If you're working with your board and your board is making decisions, this can be a great opportunity to use social proof. One example I will use here is the power of the peer, when you're working with your board. It will always be more effective for your board members to be getting the social proof they need to make decisions and to kind of guide their behavior. They're getting that, if they're actually seeing this happen with a peer. They're getting the message from a peer. They're being asked a question by a peer. So that is one way. We'll talk about a few more ways, because I'm going to get very practical in the second half of this session. But that's one example of how you can leverage the power of social proof, for example, with your board. Thinking about your donors as well. Also very influenced by social proof. They're looking outside themselves, and they may even be looking to other donors to understand, how do I behave in this moment? So you can weave those examples of social proof throughout your conversations, throughout your communications. One beautiful example of social proof is how powerful it can be for donors to read about other donors, let's say in your newsletter. For donors to read about a living bequest pledger who has made the decision to include your organization in their will, to use a common example, right? That's a wonderful example of social proof. Somebody's going to see that and be like, oh, that's really interesting. That's somebody else who has grandkids, has a family, loves this organization, and they figured out how to include this organization in their will. Maybe that's something I should think about too. So that's an example of social proof. I'll walk you through a couple other ways that you can leverage social proof in working with your particular audiences in the second half here. But I wanted to touch on that because I think that's a really important skill. And I also wanted to explain, like, what the heck do I mean about social proof? And we'll look at a few more ways you can do that in a moment. So We've talked about curiosity, building your curiosity skill. We've talked about leveraging the power of social proof. And third, I want to talk about the power of asking more. Okay, this one's a bit counterintuitive as well. The power of asking more in building your influence. I was first turned on to this idea by Yale professor Zoe Chance, who wrote a great book called, gonna look at my notes, Influence is Your Superpower. This is a really worthwhile read, a fairly recent book. And one of the things that really caught my eye when I was reading this book is how important it is to ask to build your influence. So Zoe Chance says the easiest thing you can do to build your influence and become more influential is just ask. Ask more often, ask more directly, and ask for more. Now, here's the beautiful thing about that advice. What do we often have the opportunity to do in our role as major gift fundraisers? We get to ask. So it's a great reframe for you to even think about the opportunity when you are soliciting a donor for a gift. This is an opportunity to build your influence. I love this. But you can also broaden that frame and think about, how can I actually ask more often, ask for more? How can I use that outside of the context of soliciting a gift? In my mind, asking your donors more often can include the very valuable idea of asking for advice, asking for feedback, asking for influence, asking for input, asking for introductions. So if you think about this, it's like, and you're building your influence by asking more directly and asking more often. How beautifully does that dovetail with what we know to be a really effective way to work with our major donors? Asking builds your influence, and donors love being asked for advice, asked for feedback. They love being involved and engaged in that way. So thinking about this from the perspective of, this is also actually building my influence. This is not an imposition. I am not pestering them. I am not bothering them. I'm actually giving them the opportunity to talk about what they care about, give input on what they care about. And not only that, but I'm also building my influence while I'm doing it. It's beautiful. I love this. All right, so I want to hear from you now, because I've been talking for a bit now. I'm going to take a sip of my water. I want to hear from you. Let me know which of these three skills is kind of jumping out at you as something you want to work on developing. Do you want to work on your curiosity, building your curiosity skills to build your influence? Do you want to work on the idea of being more strategic about finding and using social proof? Or maybe you want to work on all three. Does the idea of asking more directly, asking more often, asking for more, does that stand out to you as something you'd like to do to build your influence? I want to hear from you. Go ahead and drop that below. Curiosity, asking more, or social proof. Let me know what you want to work on in your work in building your influence. And then I'm going to talk more specifically about exactly how you can be doing this right now with your donors, with your boards, and internally in your organization, whether that's through managing up, working with your colleagues and peers. I'm going to take a sip of my water because I've been talking a lot this morning. And I'm also very excited to hear from you what's standing out. That will also help me know where to spend a bit more time on how to actually use these skills practically. So let me know, are you team curiosity? Are you team asking more? Are you team social proof? So I'm seeing Rosemary is talking about social proof. Kate and Penny are like, we want to talk about asking more. I love this. Asking for advice, asking. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of people wanting to talk about asking more. So I'm going to spend a bit of time on that. I love that. So go ahead and drop that in, and I'll be touching on all three of these areas. All right, so let's talk about donors. All right, let's talk about donors. So we actually touched on donors quite a bit. So I'll use a few examples here just to make sure, and let's hone this in a bit more on the asking idea, because folks like that. So how are people asking more often with their donors right now in general? Let's talk a bit about donors. So the one that stands out for me is looking through and this is so top of mind. So I was literally just on a call with a client looking through their strategic action plan for their major donors for the year. So we're mapping out what is happening when with all of our donors. When you're thinking about that, and hopefully you're doing that as well, we can actually be thinking about how can we weave in asking more throughout the year, because it doesn't just have to be the solicitation, how we can weave it in more. And to use one example, let's say we are wanting to ask for advice and ask for feedback. Often folks get stuck there, and the problem tends to be is that we're thinking like too big, like that we have to be asking for feedback or advice on something very large and profound, like our strategic plan or our campaign, our plans for a big capital campaign that's coming up. Those are great ways, and those are great ways to be asking for advice and feedback, be asking even for a donor to become a volunteer, for example, on a campaign cabinet, to use some examples there. But you can be asking in smaller ways as well, right? Like you don't always have to, it doesn't always have to be a huge earth-shattering thing. It can be a smaller thing. It can be a simple thing. It can be like, we're actually facing this challenge right now. I want to run it by you. Run it by you to see if you have any thoughts for us in terms of kind of how to be tackling like X, Y, and Z. So it's very useful to keep this lens and be thinking, if I want to be asking more, and I want to actually be asking outside of the solicitation, as powerful as the solicitation is, how can I weave that into my action plan with my donors throughout the course of the year? What are the big and small opportunities for you to be asking donors for more? So that is one example there. You can apply this as well to all of your other audiences. One thing I've seen be really successful with a couple of clients is going on a board listening tour. So in terms of building your influence with the board, that you're actually going to your board members and asking them for input, asking them for advice, asking them for their perspective, understanding more about why they give to your organization. So you can see you can actually apply this to all of your different audiences, donors, boards. You can apply this internally as well. If you're working with peers, if you're working with leaders, asking for help, asking for support, asking your, the service provider or program team, for their ideas as well. So sorry, many things are happening here. Yeah, thanks. So it's all happening here today. So that just gives you an example of, if you use that frame, you'll often discover many, many amazing ways you can ask to build your influence. If other folks have ideas, I'd love you to drop those below as well. And then I'm actually going to be moving on to thinking about applying the social proof idea. And here I actually want to talk about boards, because I know, getting your boards involved in fundraising, working with your boards is one of the things that we're often thinking a lot about, getting your boards giving as well. And I find the social proof piece can actually be really effective in working with boards. So I'll give you a few more examples of what I mean by social proof in this context. We already talked about this idea of hearing from a peer. Hearing from a peer is social proof. If you're working with a board, another example of social proof is bringing in or leaning on expert opinion. This is a great example of social proof. For a lot of folks that I work with, this is a really helpful role that I play, especially in the campaign planning process. Oftentimes clients will say, I've been saying these things for a while, but for some reason, when you come in from outside the organization, they can hear you more easily than they can hear me. I had a mentor who used to talk about this, and it always made me laugh. She always said, an expert is someone who comes from 10 miles away and carries a briefcase. It's a great way of summing up this idea of, you actually have expertise internally, but sometimes it's just easier for boards and for leaders to hear an expert opinion from outside of the organization. You can lean on this in many ways, right? You can lean on this through research. You can lean on this through quotes. You can lean on this through bringing in an expert on the topic that you want to be influencing your board on. You can actually think about, for example, using case studies. I love this idea. I've had great success with that in working with boards to say, hey, you know what, this organization we admire has actually been really successful in their capital campaign planning. Maybe someone will join us to talk a little bit more about that, what went well, what didn't go well, what to look out for. So it's a great example of like using the case study as a social proof as well. So I love using social proof with boards. I love using social proof with leaders. And as we already talked about, social proof can be very effective to build your influence with donors as well, especially when they're hearing from peers, they're, being able to look to other donors for some examples of some inspiration for the steps or that they want to take. So that is social proof. And then finally, I wanted to talk a little bit more about asking more. We did cover that off quite a bit already, but let me touch back on that to make sure if you've got any questions while I'm closing things off, be sure to drop those in the comments as well so I can answer those. So we talked more about asking, and I'd say if we're thinking about this context of asking for more, asking more often, asking more directly, we can see this play out with donors in the ways I described already, in terms of asking for advice, asking for feedback, maybe even asking them to volunteer if you've got appropriate volunteer roles that they're going to be effective in. So thinking about those as being the recap of the ways to ask for more with your donors. I think you can also do this with your board. I mentioned the idea of this board listening tour, for example. I love it, right? As you're also using that power of building influence through asking and coming around to them and asking their advice, asking for feedback. Shannon sharing how effective it can be to ask actually, even more powerful, asking third-party event organizers to kind of actually be the case study or to mentor other people in terms of inspiring them to do the same thing. I love that example, very practical example from Shannon. But like, how are we asking? So we've got the board listening tour. Let's think about influencing with your leaders, like influencing with your CEO. I wonder if there's ways that you can ask them to be building your influence internally, right? What can you be doing in terms of great strategic questions to get your CEO talking about, what's important to them, especially if you've got a new CEO coming in? What are their priorities for the first 3 months? What can you do to help to enable their success? Like, I love the asking more idea in terms of building influence, because I see all these ways you can actually apply this with all of your different audiences, whether donors, board members, colleagues, whether they're your CEOs, using that frame of how we can ask more often, more directly for more, and how that can actually build our influence. That tends to be counterintuitive for folks, but that is a superpower that you can develop as well. So go ahead. We've just had a couple more minutes before we wrap up. If you've got any outstanding questions or comments, but I just wanted to give you a super quick 30-minute toolkit on 3 key things and skills you can be building, and then actually how to be practically applying those with 3 of your most important audiences. Arthur, you asked me a question that is quite might take quite a bit longer than the time we have. How does one identify participants for a capital campaign cabinet? I'll give you one of my favorite quick tips that is related to asking for more. And that is during the feasibility conversations. Hopefully you are thinking about doing these and speaking with your donors already. It's one of the favorite questions I like to ask when I'm talking with donors and getting advice and feedback about our campaign and our case. I will like to say, does anyone come to mind that you think we need to be speaking with about this campaign? And or do you have anyone in mind who would be a great volunteer for us? So you're actually leveraging that asking power to actually work with the folks in your community to help you identify people who might be good volunteers for you. So that is my very quick tip for you. As it relates. And I just want to make sure we don't run out of time, because if you enjoyed our time together today and it's your first time and you aren't on my email list yet, I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to sign up for that. I do these kind of live sessions very regularly. I also have a lot of great free resources to share as they relate to capital campaigns and major gift fundraising. And if you're not on my email list, you can join up at blueskyphilanthropy.com/subscribe. And if you do that now, we're actually going to be sending out our next Major Gift Insider next week. So you'll get that. And you'll also get notice of all of these different live sessions, trainings, and resources that I have available for you. So thank you so much. I'll be timely. I'll wrap up now. And I want to wish you best of luck. I'd love to hear back from you if you're testing out any of these ways to grow your influence. Let me know how it goes. I love to hear when you're successful for this. I love to hear how you've been using, have you been trying to build your muscles around some of these influencing skills? So keep in touch, and I'll look forward to seeing you at our next live learning session. All right, my friends, we'll see you soon.